President Ibrahim Traore sat alone in the dimly lit archives of his presidential residence, surrounded by towering shelves of dusty files that chronicled decades of Burkina Faso's tumultuous political history. The old library, with its musty smell of aged paper and leather-bound volumes, had become his sanctuary for late-night contemplation and strategic planning. The mahogany desk, inherited from colonial administrators decades past, bore the scars of countless late-night sessions where previous leaders had grappled with the nation's challenges. Flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows across the walls, creating an almost mystical atmosphere that seemed appropriate for uncovering the secrets of the past. The weight of leadership pressed heavily upon his shoulders as he methodically worked through box after box of classified materials. Each document told a story of political intrigue, economic manipulation, and the constant struggle of a small African nation to maintain its independence in a world dominated by more powerful forces. The silence was broken only by the occasional rustling of papers and the distant sound of night guards making their rounds through the presidential compound. Tonight, however, would prove to be different from all the others. Something in the air felt charged with possibility and danger, as if the very universe was preparing to reveal secrets that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of his nation's future. Before him lay scattered hundreds of classified intelligence reports from previous administrations, each file containing secrets that could reshape the understanding of his nation's past. As he methodically examined document after document, his weathered fingers traced the edges of folders marked with various security classifications. The weight of history pressed down upon him in that silent chamber where the ghosts of political decisions past seemed to whisper their secrets. His attention was suddenly captured by a particular file whose cover bore the ominous marking, "Classified National Security, Eyes Only." The red stamp seemed to pulse with significance in the amber light of his desk lamp. As President Traore carefully opened the file, his eyes widened with a mixture of disbelief and righteous anger. The documents contained within painted a picture so shocking that he instinctively straightened in his chair, his pulse quickening. The intelligence reports revealed a conspiracy of staggering proportions that would have seemed like fiction if not for the meticulous documentation spread before him. According to the evidence, a carefully orchestrated network of corrupt officials from Burkina Faso's previous government had committed what could only be described as the ultimate act of national betrayal. Working in coordination with international criminal networks and foreign intelligence operatives, they had systematically looted the nation's gold reserves over a period of several years. The operation had been conducted with surgical precision, using diplomatic pouches, falsified shipping manifests, and a complex web of shell companies to obscure the paper trail. The stolen treasure, worth an estimated $200 billion, represented not just the nation's financial reserves, but the accumulated wealth of generations of Burkinabe people. This gold had been mined from their ancestral lands, processed by their workers, and stored as a guarantee of economic sovereignty and future prosperity. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking in its audacity and thoroughness. Bank records showed systematic transfers disguised as legitimate international trade transactions. Shipping documents revealed cargo containers that left Burkina Faso filled with gold, but arrived at their destinations containing only sand and rocks. The conspiracy had required coordination at the highest levels of government, including cabinet ministers, central bank officials, and military commanders who controlled access to the secure storage facilities. As President Traore absorbed the full implications of these revelations, he felt a mixture of rage and determination that seemed to burn in his very soul. This wasn't merely theft, it was an assault on the dignity and future of every citizen of Burkina Faso. The stolen gold represented schools that could have been built, hospitals that could have been equipped, roads that could have been paved, and opportunities that could have been created for millions of his people. President Traore's hands trembled as the full implications of the discovery sunk in. Who had orchestrated this betrayal? When had it occurred? Under whose authority had such a massive transfer been authorized? These questions swirled in his mind like a hurricane of rage and determination. The betrayal cut deeper than any military defeat or political setback. It struck at the very heart of national dignity and self-determination. Without hesitation, he summoned his National Intelligence Agency director for an emergency briefing. The investigation that followed would reveal layers of deception extending far beyond simple corruption. What initially appeared to be domestic theft gradually revealed itself as part of an elaborate international conspiracy involving multiple foreign intelligence agencies, multinational corporations, and shadowy financial networks operating across several continents. The tentacles of this conspiracy reached into the highest echelons of international finance and geopolitics. Intelligence analysts working around the clock discovered that the operation had been planned for over a decade, with sleeper agents and corrupted officials carefully positioned throughout Burkina Faso's government and financial institutions. Swiss bank accounts, offshore companies in the Cayman Islands, and complex derivatives trading schemes had all been employed to launder and hide the stolen wealth. The investigation team, working with forensic accountants and international law enforcement agencies, began mapping the complete network of individuals and organizations involved. What they discovered was a criminal enterprise of unprecedented scale and sophistication, one that made traditional organized crime look primitive by comparison. President Traore realized that recovering the gold would require more than diplomatic protests or legal proceedings. He was facing adversaries with virtually unlimited resources, sophisticated technology, and influence at the highest levels of international power structures. This would be a battle that would test every aspect of his leadership and his nation's resolve. President Traore immediately ordered the arrest and suspension of all former officials who had been involved in managing the gold reserves during the suspected time period. A new, carefully vetted team was assembled to continue the investigation and begin the delicate process of recovery. The search for truth had begun, but the path ahead would prove far more treacherous than anyone had imagined. The trail of evidence led investigators to a remote, desolate region in Russia that seemed to exist outside the normal boundaries of civilization. This area, known only by a classified designation in Soviet-era documents, had served as a clandestine storage and research facility during the height of the Cold War. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, characterized by endless expanses of frozen tundra, abandoned industrial complexes, and a network of underground installations that had been built to withstand nuclear warfare. The climate was brutal, with temperatures regularly dropping to -40 degrees Celsius and winds that could cut through even the most advanced protective clothing. This was a place where few humans ventured willingly, making it an ideal location for activities that required absolute secrecy and isolation from prying eyes. The nearest civilian settlement was over 200 kilometers away, connected only by a single road that was impassable for most of the year. Intelligence satellites and ground-penetrating radar surveys confirmed that Burkina Faso's stolen gold had indeed been transported to this forbidding location and hidden within an elaborate underground facility that had been constructed during the Soviet era. The bunker system extended deep into the permafrost, with multiple levels connected by reinforced tunnels and protected by sophisticated security systems that had been maintained and upgraded over the decades. What made the situation even more complex was that the Russian government itself had been completely unaware of the treasure's presence on their territory. The facility had been maintained by a private security company with connections to former KGB operatives, operating under the cover of environmental research and waste management services. Even Russia's most sophisticated intelligence networks had failed to detect the presence of such a massive treasure within their own borders. The irony was not lost on President Traore. His nation's stolen wealth was being hidden in a country whose government was just as much a victim of deception as Burkina Faso itself. This realization would become crucial in the diplomatic negotiations that would follow, as both nations found themselves confronting the same shadowy network of international criminals and corrupt officials. President Traore's next move required the most delicate diplomatic maneuvering of his entire career. The conversation he was about to initiate would be recorded, analyzed, and scrutinized by intelligence agencies around the world. Every word would carry enormous weight, and the slightest misstep could lead to international diplomatic crisis or military confrontation. Before placing the call, he consulted with his foreign minister, intelligence director, and senior diplomatic advisors. They spent hours crafting the precise language that would convey the urgency of the situation while maintaining the respect and protocol appropriate for communication between sovereign nations. The stakes could not have been higher. This single conversation could determine whether the recovery mission succeeded or whether Burkina Faso's national treasure remained lost forever. The secure communication system used for the call was the most advanced available, employing multiple layers of encryption and routing the signal through diplomatic channels that were theoretically protected by international law. However, everyone involved understood that in the world of international espionage, no communication was truly secure from determined eavesdroppers. When President Traore finally placed the call, his voice was steady and authoritative, reflecting the gravity of the moment. "Mr. President, I am contacting you regarding a matter of the utmost importance to the sovereignty and dignity of the nation of Burkina Faso. Our intelligence services have confirmed that treasure belonging to our people has been illegally stored within your territory without your government's knowledge or consent." The Russian president's response was immediate and professional. "President Traore, I can assure you that Russia does not knowingly harbor stolen assets belonging to any nation. If you can provide evidence that property rightfully belonging to Burkina Faso is located within our borders, we will cooperate fully in its immediate return. This gold represents not just our nation's financial reserves, but our honor, our dignity, and our children's future," President Traore continued with deep conviction. "We request its immediate return to its rightful owners, the people of Burkina Faso." The Russian president's commitment was unequivocal. "If this treasure truly belongs to your people, we will return it immediately and without condition. Russia does not harbor stolen wealth, regardless of how it came to be on our territory or who placed it there." Both leaders agreed that the recovery mission would be conducted with absolute discretion and maximum security. They understood that the operation's success depended on maintaining complete operational secrecy while ensuring the safe transfer of such a massive treasure. Neither leader suspected that their every move was being monitored by one of the world's most dangerous and sophisticated intelligence organizations. Unbeknownst to both leaders, their historic conversation was being monitored by one of the world's most sophisticated and ruthless intelligence organizations. Mossad, Israel's legendary spy agency, had been systematically intercepting and analyzing communications between African nations and Russia for months as part of a broader intelligence gathering operation focused on emerging geopolitical alliances that could affect Israeli interests in the region. The surveillance network employed by Mossad was truly state-of-the-art, combining signals intelligent satellites positioned in geosynchronous orbit, underwater cable tapping systems, and an extensive network of human intelligence assets embedded within diplomatic missions, telecommunications companies, and government agencies across multiple continents. This comprehensive surveillance apparatus could intercept, decrypt, and analyze communications in real time, providing Israeli decision-makers with unparalleled insight into the private deliberations of foreign governments. Advanced artificial intelligence systems automatically flagged conversations containing specific keywords related to financial transactions, military cooperation, or strategic resources. The communication between President Traore and the Russian president triggered multiple alert systems simultaneously, bringing the matter to the immediate attention of senior Mossad operatives and Israeli government officials. Within hours of the intercepted call, a detailed intelligence briefing was being delivered to Israel's most senior decision-makers. The briefing document, classified at the highest levels of Israeli national security, outlined the unprecedented opportunity that had suddenly presented itself. The report concluded with a recommendation that would set in motion a chain of events with global implications. This situation presents a unique opportunity to simultaneously acquire significant financial assets while potentially destabilizing emerging Russian-African cooperation mechanisms. A Mossad field operative reported to headquarters with information that would set in motion a chain of events with global implications. Significant treasure transfer planned between Burkina Faso and Russia. Estimated value exceeds $200 billion. Operation appears to involve highest levels of both governments. Israeli leadership convened an emergency session to discuss this unexpected intelligence windfall. For them, this represented more than just an opportunity to seize valuable assets. It was a chance to simultaneously acquire immense wealth while framing Burkina Faso as a terrorist-supporting state on the international stage. The plan that emerged from this meeting would combine theft with character assassination on a global scale. Intelligence warnings began reaching President Traore through multiple channels, each more urgent than the last. Diplomatic sources in European capitals reported unusual activity at Israeli military installations. Electronic surveillance detected suspicious communication patterns suggesting coordination between Israeli intelligence and unknown third parties. Even allies within the African Union began expressing concerns about unspecified threats to the recovery operation. Despite these warnings, President Traore faced an impossible deadline. Every day that passed increased the risk that the criminal network responsible for the original theft would move the gold to an even more secure location, potentially making recovery impossible. The window of opportunity for action was rapidly closing, and hesitation could mean permanent loss of his nation's patrimony. The psychological pressure on the Burkinabe people was also becoming unbearable. Word of the gold's discovery had inevitably leaked to the public, creating enormous expectations for its recovery. Citizens who had endured decades of poverty and underdevelopment now saw the possibility of genuine economic transformation within their grasp. Failure to recover the treasure would not just represent a financial loss, it would completely destroy public trust in their government and potentially lead to social unrest that could destabilize the entire region. In a nationally televised address that would be remembered as one of the defining moments of his presidency, President Traore delivered a message that combined determination with barely concealed warning. The wealth of our nation has been stolen by those who believe that might makes right. But let me be clear to anyone who would dare to interfere with the recovery of our national treasure. If any enemy attempts to steal what belongs to our people, we will pierce their heart with the sword of justice. We will not rest until every ounce of gold that was taken from us is returned to its rightful place. These words, spoken with quiet intensity and broadcast simultaneously on radio and television throughout West Africa, sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles and intelligence communities worldwide. Foreign governments began urgent consultations to determine the implications of President Traore's seemingly veiled threat, while intelligence analysts worked to decode the deeper meaning behind his carefully chosen language. Meanwhile, in the frozen Russian wilderness, an operation of unprecedented scale and complexity was already underway. Russian Special Forces units operating under direct orders from the president and bound by the strictest operational security protocols had successfully located and secured the stolen treasure. The recovery site was a marvel of Soviet-era engineering, a multi-level underground facility that had been carved directly into solid rock and designed to survive nuclear warfare. The bunker system extended over 3 kilometers underground, with reinforced concrete walls that were several meters thick and sophisticated ventilation systems that had kept the interior atmosphere stable for decades. Emergency power systems, backup communication networks, and even underground water supplies had been maintained in working order, creating an almost impregnable fortress beneath the earth. When the Russian forces finally gained access to the treasure chamber, what they discovered exceeded even the most optimistic intelligence estimates. The stolen gold had been meticulously organized and cataloged, with each bar individually wrapped and labeled with its country of origin, purity level, and estimated value. Wooden crates contained thousands of gold coins from various historical periods, while sealed containers held precious gems, rare metals, and historical artifacts that had also been looted from Burkina Faso's national collection. Most significantly, the treasure trove included comprehensive documentation of the entire theft operation, bank records, shipping manifests, correspondence between conspirators, and detailed plans for additional thefts that had been scheduled but never executed. This evidence would prove invaluable in identifying and prosecuting the full network of individuals responsible for the crime. The recovery operation required specialized equipment and expertise that had to be transported to the remote site under conditions of absolute secrecy. Heavy-lift helicopters, specially designed for extreme weather operations, transported materials and personnel to the location. Mobile command centers, communication equipment, and even temporary housing facilities had to be established to support the extended operation required to safely extract and transport such a massive treasure. However, Israeli intelligence had been conducting their own sophisticated surveillance operation throughout this entire period. Mossad's capabilities in this remote region were truly extraordinary, combining advanced satellite technology with human intelligence networks that had been developed over decades of operations in hostile territories worldwide. High-resolution surveillance satellites, equipped with advanced imaging technology that could penetrate cloud cover and even detect underground activity through subtle surface changes, had been monitoring the Russian recovery site continuously. Ground-based listening posts disguised as research stations or commercial facilities had been intercepting communications and tracking movement patterns throughout the region. Most importantly, Mossad had developed detailed profiles of every individual involved in the recovery operation, from senior government officials to the technicians responsible for handling the treasure. This intelligence-gathering effort had required years of patient work, infiltrating organizations, recruiting sources, and building the comprehensive surveillance network that was now being activated for this critical operation. The Israeli plan that emerged from their intelligence assessment was audacious in both its scope and its ruthlessness. Rather than simply stealing the gold, they intended to frame the entire recovery operation as a terrorist financing scheme, thereby justifying their intervention while permanently damaging Burkina Faso's international reputation. The operation would require perfect timing, sophisticated technology, and the kind of operational coordination that had made Mossad legendary in intelligence circles worldwide. Advanced electronic warfare systems, capable of disrupting communications and navigation systems across hundreds of square kilometers, had been secretly deployed to the region. Military-grade jamming equipment, designed to incapacitate aircraft electronics without causing immediate crashes, had been positioned along the planned flight route. Most crucially, a specialized aircraft interception team, trained for precisely this type of operation, had been placed on standby at a classified military installation within range of the target aircraft. The cargo aircraft that had been selected for the repatriation mission represented the pinnacle of modern aviation technology and security systems. The massive Antonov AN-124, one of the largest cargo planes in the world, had been specially modified for this critical mission with advanced defensive countermeasures, redundant navigation systems, and state-of-the-art communication equipment that was theoretically immune to electronic interference. The aircraft's cargo hold had been reconfigured with specialized storage systems designed to protect the gold bars from both physical damage and detection by various scanning technologies. Temperature control systems maintained optimal conditions for preserving any historical documents or artifacts, while sophisticated security systems would alert ground control immediately if any unauthorized access was attempted. The flight crew consisted of Russia's most experienced pilots, each of whom had been personally selected by the Russian president and subjected to extensive security screening. They had been briefed on the critical importance of their mission and the potential threats they might face during the long journey to Burkina Faso. Backup pilots, emergency equipment, and even alternate landing sites had been prepared for every conceivable contingency. The flight plan had been carefully designed to avoid known conflict zones, areas of political instability, and regions where hostile forces might attempt to interfere with the mission. The route would take the aircraft through multiple countries, each of which had been diplomatically contacted to ensure safe passage and emergency landing rights if required. As the Antonov lifted off from the remote Russian airfield in the pre-dawn darkness, its departure was monitored by multiple government agencies and tracked by the most advanced radar systems available. For the first several hours of flight, everything proceeded exactly according to plan. Regular position reports were transmitted to both Russian and Burkinabe air traffic control centers, while satellite communications provided constant updates on the aircraft's status and estimated arrival time. Then, suddenly and inexplicably, the aircraft vanished from all tracking systems. Radar screens went blank, satellite communications ceased, and the plane seemed to disappear from existence itself. In Ouagadougou's high-tech command center, President Traore watched in horror as the blue line representing their aircraft's progress simply vanished from the display. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice barely concealing his anguish. The command room fell silent as operators frantically checked their systems. The intelligence chief delivered the devastating news. "Sir, the aircraft's signal has completely disappeared. No satellite link, no radar contact, no emergency beacon, nothing." "Could this be jamming?" President Traore asked, though he already suspected the answer would be far worse. "Possible, but this level of technological interference is beyond the capabilities of most nations. Only a few countries possess this kind of advanced electronic warfare capability." The Israeli media campaign that followed was a masterpiece of propaganda and disinformation, orchestrated with the precision and resources that only a state-level intelligence operation could provide. Within hours of the aircraft's disappearance, carefully prepared news stories began appearing simultaneously across multiple Israeli television networks, newspapers, and online platforms, all presenting identical narratives with slightly different details to create the appearance of independent reporting. The central claim was explosive and designed for maximum international impact. Israeli intelligence forces had successfully intercepted what they described as the largest terrorist gold smuggling operation in modern history. According to their fabricated narrative, Mossad operatives had prevented a massive cargo shipment from reaching terrorist organizations that planned to use the $200 billion in gold to fund attacks against innocent civilians across multiple continents. The sophistication of this disinformation campaign was truly remarkable. Fake documentary evidence was produced, including falsified shipping manifests, forged communications between alleged terrorist operatives, and fabricated intelligence reports that appeared to validate Israeli claims. Professional actors posing as intelligence sources and terrorism experts appeared on international news programs to provide seemingly authoritative commentary supporting the Israeli narrative. Social media platforms were flooded with coordinated messaging campaigns designed to amplify the false narrative and discredit any alternative explanations. Automated bot networks, sophisticated propaganda accounts, and paid influencers worked in concert to trend hashtags, share fabricated evidence, and attack anyone who questioned the official Israeli version of events. International news organizations, lacking independent sources of information about events in such a remote location, initially accepted Israeli claims at face value and began repeating them without conducting proper verification. The story spread across global media networks with remarkable speed, appearing on front pages and leading television news broadcasts in dozens of countries within a matter of hours. The psychological impact of this coordinated disinformation campaign was immediate and devastating for Burkina Faso's international standing. Major international financial institutions, citing concerns about potential terrorist financing, began freezing the country's overseas accounts and blocking routine financial transactions. Several European and North American countries imposed preliminary economic sanctions, while international development organizations suspended ongoing aid projects and technical assistance programs. The African Union found itself in an impossible position, torn between supporting a member nation and avoiding association with what appeared to be terrorist activities. Even traditionally friendly governments began distancing themselves diplomatically, canceling scheduled visits and postponing cooperative agreements that had been months or years in development. Most painfully for President Traore, many ordinary citizens around the world who had previously viewed Burkina Faso as a symbol of African resilience and independence now saw it as a threat to global security. Social media platforms were filled with angry comments and xenophobic attacks directed at Burkinabe people, while African immigrants in various countries reported experiencing increased discrimination and suspicion. "This is our sacred trust, our national heritage," President Traore said to his national security advisor, his voice heavy with emotion and barely controlled anger. "We have committed no crime except attempting to recover what was stolen from us, and now we're being branded as terrorists for defending our sovereignty and seeking justice for our people." The false narrative was achieving its intended strategic objectives with devastating effectiveness. By framing Burkina Faso as a terrorist-supporting state, Israel had not only justified their theft of the gold, but had also created a situation where international law and diplomatic pressure would actually work in their favor rather than against them. Air traffic controllers in Ouagadougou continued their desperate attempts to re-establish contact with the missing aircraft, but their efforts proved futile. The plane had vanished as completely as if it had been erased from existence, leaving no trace and no clues about its ultimate fate. A senior intelligence officer approached President Traore with a grim assessment. "Sir, we have strong reason to believe this operation could only have been conducted by Mossad. They've used electromagnetic pulse technology to disable the aircraft's systems and then physically captured it. This level of sophisticated aerial interception requires resources and capabilities that only a few nations possess." President Traore's expression hardened with determination and barely controlled rage. If they think we'll accept this humiliation silently, they're gravely mistaken. We may be a small nation, but we will show the world that even small nations can bring the sky crashing down when justice demands it. 3 days later, Israel made what appeared to be a magnanimous gesture to the international community. In a carefully staged press conference, Israeli officials announced they were returning the cargo aircraft to Burkina Faso, along with what they described as a sincere apology for any misunderstanding. The tone was patronizing, treating the entire incident as if it had been a minor bureaucratic error rather than an act of international piracy. The Israeli statement read, "Upon further investigation, we have determined that the aircraft belonged to Burkina Faso's legitimate government. In the spirit of international cooperation and our commitment to regional stability, we are returning the aircraft and its contents with our apologies for any inconvenience caused." When news of the aircraft's return reached Ouagadougou Airport, President Traoré made an unprecedented decision. "I will personally oversee this operation," he declared. "This matter cannot be resolved without my direct involvement and supervision." Accompanied by his security chief and senior aviation authority officials, President Traoré traveled to the airport, where international media had gathered to cover what many expected to be a triumphant moment of recovery and reconciliation. Television cameras from around the world were positioned to capture what they assumed would be a positive conclusion to an international incident. The Israeli cargo aircraft landed on the runway to spontaneous applause from gathered crowds. Citizens waved flags and chanted slogans of victory, believing their national treasure was finally coming home. However, President Traoré remained conspicuously silent, his intuition warning him that their enemies would never surrender so easily or genuinely apologize for their actions. As the aircraft's doors opened, military inspection teams entered to conduct a thorough examination. What they discovered inside was both shocking and insulting. The cargo hold was completely empty, except for a few fake containers, some counterfeit bags, and a mocking note that read, "Consider this a symbolic apology." The insult was calculated and deliberate. Not only had they stolen Burkina Faso's gold, but they had returned an empty aircraft, as if the entire nation and its leadership were too naive to recognize such an obvious deception. The humiliation was designed to demonstrate Israel's perceived superiority and Burkina Faso's powerlessness on the international stage. President Traoré's eyes blazed with righteous fury as he examined the empty containers. "So this is your friendship," he said through gritted teeth, his voice barely containing his rage. With television cameras still rolling, President Traoré made a decision that would change everything. He would use this moment of global attention to expose the truth and demonstrate that Burkina Faso would not accept this treatment silently. "This is a lie and a deception," he declared to the assembled media. "This isn't just an attack on Burkina Faso, it's a message to every small nation that your sovereignty, your dignity, and your national treasure are never truly safe from those who believe might makes right." The empty aircraft incident became the catalyst for President Traoré's most audacious plan yet. He immediately convened an emergency meeting with his intelligence and cybersecurity teams, where he would make a decision that would demonstrate the power of justice combined with advanced technology. "This is now war," he announced to his assembled advisors, "and I will not stop until we achieve complete victory." Among those present was Issa, a former Mossad hacker who had defected years earlier due to moral disagreements with the agency's methods and objectives. Issa had approached President Traoré months before, offering his expertise and inside knowledge of Israeli intelligence operations. His deep understanding of Mossad's technological capabilities and operational procedures would prove invaluable in the coming digital warfare. "Sir, if you give me authorization, I can begin the next phase immediately," Issa said quietly, his eyes reflecting both determination and a desire for redemption. President Traoré handed Issa a document marked Operation Zero Trust. The plan outlined a comprehensive cyber warfare campaign designed to expose Israeli deception while demonstrating Burkina Faso's unexpected technological capabilities. The operation would target Israeli military and intelligence systems using their own tools and methods against them. Issa smiled grimly as he reviewed the operational parameters. Now Israel will have more to fear from their own systems than from any external enemy. The command room's lights dimmed as multiple computer screens came to life, displaying complex networks of data streams, satellite communications, and system vulnerabilities. What began in that moment was not just a cyber attack, but a complete reimagining of how small nations could defend themselves against more powerful adversaries in the digital age. At 3 a.m., the presidential palace's secret command center became the epicenter of one of the most sophisticated cyber warfare operations ever conducted by a developing nation. Issa, the reformed Mossad operative, sat before an array of advanced computer systems while President Traore observed with quiet intensity. "Are you ready?" President Traore asked with grave seriousness. "Not only ready, but now their own weapons will be turned against them," Issa replied, executing a final command sequence that would begin the systematic infiltration of Israeli defense networks. Within seconds, screens at secret Israeli drone bases across the region went dark. The sophisticated unmanned aircraft that Mossad had deployed for surveillance operations throughout the Middle East and Africa were suddenly offline, but their shutdown was only the beginning of something far more devastating. One by one, these drones came back online, but now under the complete control of operators in Ouagadougou rather than Tel Aviv. Issa and President Traore had successfully hijacked Israel's own surveillance network and were preparing to use it for a demonstration of power that would shock the international community. The first drone was redirected toward Tel Aviv, the second toward Jerusalem's government district, and the third toward Netanyahu's personal residence. As these aircraft approached their new targets, emergency sirens began wailing throughout Israeli cities. Citizens ran for bomb shelters, children cried in terror, and military personnel scrambled to understand how their own defense systems had been compromised so completely. However, this was not a conventional attack designed to cause casualties or destruction. Each drone was equipped with a powerful loudspeaker system broadcasting a clear message in multiple languages. "You played with our dignity, now we will deprive you of your peace." The first drone passed low over Netanyahu's residence and dropped what appeared to be an explosive device. The detonation created a tremendous noise and cloud of smoke, but no actual damage. It was a psychological weapon designed to demonstrate capability rather than cause harm. Attached to the device was a simple note: "This represents the weight of your lies." Netanyahu emerged from his residence in a state of panic, his family trailing behind him in obvious terror. The man who had projected strength and invincibility on the international stage was now running from his own home like a frightened civilian. He screamed incoherently at his security detail. "How is this possible? Our systems were supposed to be impenetrable." Israeli defense forces immediately convened emergency sessions as military leaders struggled to comprehend the scope of the security breach. One general reported with barely concealed panic, "Sir, our own drones have turned against us. We have completely lost control of our aerial surveillance network." The Mossad director threw his phone against the wall in frustration. "This isn't just hacking, this is complete humiliation. Our reputation for technological superiority has been destroyed in a single night." Meanwhile, President Traore remained calm and composed in his command center, watching Israeli television broadcasts that showed the chaos and confusion his operation had created. Issa asked quietly, "Sir, should we proceed with complete system shutdown of their infrastructure?" President Traore shook his head thoughtfully. "Not yet. First, we need to ensure they understand that their castles are built on sand rather than stone." As part of the cyber operation, Israeli media networks had also been compromised. Every television channel in the country was broadcasting the same repeating message: "You stole our gold. We have stolen your peace." This simple statement was designed not only for Israeli audiences, but for the entire world, demonstrating that even small nations could respond effectively when their sovereignty was violated. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Israeli citizens, accustomed to feeling secure behind their nation's advanced defense systems, suddenly found themselves vulnerable and exposed. The carefully constructed narrative of invincibility and technological superiority was crumbling in real time on live television. International response was swift and dramatic. At the White House, President Donald Trump convened his own emergency meeting. "I warned them not to provoke this man. Now Israel is on their own. We're not getting dragged into a conflict they created through their own arrogance." Global confidence in Israeli defense capabilities plummeted as news of the successful cyber attack spread worldwide. Military analysts and intelligence experts struggled to understand how a small African nation had managed to penetrate and control systems that were supposedly among the most secure in the world. Social media platforms exploded with commentary and analysis. Hashtags like "Burkina Faso fights back," "Digital Revolution," and "Justice for Africa" began trending globally as people around the world expressed support for President Traore's bold response to Israeli aggression. Even traditionally pro-Israeli news outlets were forced to acknowledge the effectiveness of the cyber attack. A television anchor in Tel Aviv admitted on live television, "Today, Israel didn't lose weapons or territory, we lost our pride and our sense of invulnerability." As the night progressed, Issa revealed the full extent of their cyber infiltration capabilities. "Sir, we've now gained access to their nuclear facility control systems. With a single click, we could expose all their classified nuclear secrets to the entire world." President Traore remained silent for several moments, contemplating the enormous responsibility that such power represented. Finally, he spoke with quiet determination. "I'm fighting a war for justice, not for revenge, but they seem to interpret our restraint as weakness. Perhaps it's time to send a final message that they cannot ignore." He then recorded a video message that was immediately broadcast on every hacked media network worldwide. Speaking directly to the camera with absolute conviction, President Traore delivered an ultimatum that would reverberate through diplomatic circles across the globe. "We did not come to destroy you, but to respond to you in your own language. You called our gold terrorism. You branded our dignity as crime. You have 1 hour to return our $200 billion treasure, or we will deprive you of your $400 billion in military assets. We have broken down your digital walls, turned your drones against you, and stolen your peace of mind. The choice is yours: justice or continued consequences." The message sent shockwaves through international diplomatic communities. Emergency meetings were convened at the United Nations. The European Union issued urgent statements, and nations around the world called for immediate resolution of the crisis. France, Germany, Spain, and even Canada issued official statements urging Israel to cooperate fully with Burkina Faso to prevent an escalation that could destabilize the entire international system. At the White House, President Trump was once again on a video call with Netanyahu, but this time his tone was markedly different from previous conversations. If you don't resolve this situation immediately, consider our support officially withdrawn. I will not sacrifice my political credibility for your stubborn pride." Netanyahu, who had once projected confidence and authority on the world stage, was now hiding in his office bunker, a broken man whose carefully constructed image had been shattered in a matter of hours. The Mossad director approached him with obvious reluctance. "Sir, if we don't comply with President Traore's demands, he has the capability to expose all our classified operations. The damage to our national security would be catastrophic and irreversible." Through gritted teeth, Netanyahu finally capitulated. "Send it all back. The gold. Everything. And include a formal apology. Just make this nightmare end." A coded message was immediately transmitted to Ouagadougou. "We are returning the original cargo with complete security protocols. We acknowledge our error and hope you will prioritize international peace and stability in your response." President Traore smiled slightly as he turned to Issa. "We'll end this operation now, but they will never forget the lesson we've taught them about respecting smaller nations." Orders were given to gradually restore the hacked Israeli networks and systems, but monitoring capabilities would remain in place indefinitely as a guarantee against future aggression. The message was clear. Burkina Faso now possessed the technological capability to respond to any future threats against its sovereignty. The world witnessed something unprecedented. A small African nation had defeated one of the world's most advanced military powers without firing a single shot, using only technology, intelligence, and unwavering moral conviction. Social media exploded with admiration for President Traore's strategy and execution. Burkina Faso's airport was about to witness one of the most significant moments in the nation's modern history. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as crowds gathered to witness what they hoped would be the final vindication of their country's dignity and sovereignty. Live broadcasts from the airport were transmitted throughout Burkina Faso and picked up by international news networks around the world. This wasn't just about recovering stolen gold, it was about proving that small nations could successfully defend themselves against more powerful adversaries when armed with courage, intelligence, and advanced technology. Air traffic control announced that both cargo aircraft carrying the recovered gold had entered Burkina Faso's airspace. The news triggered celebrations throughout the country. But President Traore remained characteristically calm and focused. For him, this represented more than financial recovery. It was the restoration of national dignity and a powerful message to oppressed peoples everywhere. The first aircraft landed, followed closely by the second. Both were accompanied by joint Russian and Burkina Special Forces units, ensuring maximum security for the precious cargo. As the aircraft doors opened, security teams conducted thorough inspections of every container and compartment. This time, the gold was genuine and complete. Every bar bore Burkina Faso's national seal, confirming its authenticity and rightful ownership. The treasure that had been stolen through international conspiracy was finally returning to its rightful place, complete with all documentation proving its legitimate ownership. President Traore personally lifted one of the gold bars, holding it up to the sky as tears of relief and gratitude filled his eyes. "This is more than gold," he declared to the assembled crowd. "This is our nation's honor, and today that honor has been fully restored through courage, intelligence, and unwavering determination." In his victory address, President Traore reflected on the broader significance of their success. This was never about war or revenge. It was about defending our national dignity and demonstrating that justice, when combined with knowledge and technology, becomes the most powerful force in the world. We have shown that small nations need not accept injustice silently when they possess the courage to stand up for their rights. Immediate orders were issued to double military security at all gold mining facilities throughout the country. The national treasure would be relocated to a secure, undisclosed location with state-of-the-art protection systems. Additionally, President Traore announced that Burkina Faso would file compensation claims against Israel in international courts for the economic and diplomatic damage caused by their actions. Israeli media remained largely silent about the resolution, offering no explanations or justifications for their country's behavior. The only statement that appeared consistently across Israeli news networks was a simple admission: "We lost because we built our strategy on lies and deception." President Trump publicly praised President Traore's handling of the crisis. Leaders like Ibrahim Tarore possess the vision and courage necessary to change the course of history. This victory demonstrates what's possible when small nations refuse to accept injustice. Social media platforms worldwide continued celebrating the remarkable achievement. Messages of support poured in from across Africa and beyond, with hashtags like Africa Rising, Digital Justice, and Traore the Lion trending globally for weeks. Following this historic victory, President Traore launched the Digital African Defense Alliance, an innovative partnership designed to prevent any African nation from becoming victim to similar international conspiracies. The alliance would share cybersecurity resources, intelligence capabilities, and defensive technologies among member nations. 1 year later, the anniversary of the gold recovery was declared National Dignity and Treasure Day, a permanent holiday celebrating the victory of justice over oppression. Children throughout Burkina Faso learned in schools that intellectual and technological warfare could be just as important as traditional military defense in protecting national sovereignty. As the sun set on that historic day, President Traore stood alone on the presidential palace balcony, contemplating the magnitude of their achievement. Issa approached quietly and said with satisfaction, "Sir, we actually did it. We proved that justice and technology combined can overcome any oppressor." President Traore gazed toward the horizon and replied thoughtfully, "This is only the beginning, Issa. The world still has much to learn about the true power of truth, justice, and the unbreakable spirit of free peoples everywhere." And so Burkina Faso's gold returned home, but more importantly, a new chapter in international relations had been written. One where small nations demonstrated they possessed both the capability and the determination to defend their sovereignty against any aggressor, no matter how powerful or technologically advanced. The story of President Ibrahim Traore and Burkina Faso's digital victory became legend, inspiring oppressed peoples around the world and serving as a permanent reminder that justice, when armed with courage and intelligence, remains the most powerful force in human affairs. The Golden Conspiracy had been defeated, but its legacy would shine forever as a beacon of hope for small nations everywhere.